The other day I received a package in the mail from my friend Chris. He's a big perfume collector, and he and I share love for many of the same perfumes, one of which is Dior Homme. Chris travels a lot and has collected several bottles of Dior Homme and then sent me one because he knows that I love it. This is incredibly generous and considerate of Chris, so thank you very much. I appreciate it so much. I've been a big fan of this fragrance ever since it was released in 2005. I remember it so well. And although I've loved this fragrance for so long, I've actually never owned a bottle until now. At the height of my craze for Dior Homme, I was living in Paris and I found ways to just wear it all the time without owning it. I'd go swimming regularly at this public swimming pool at Les Halles in Paris. Les Halles is this complex. It's kind of an underground mall next to a big metro station. And it has a cinema and, like I said, the swimming pool. So after doing laps, I'd walk through the mall, go into Sephora, and just drench myself with Dior Homme. It's the only fragrance at Sephora that I put on because it's the only one I wanted to smell. I thought it smelled so good on me, and apparently the rest of Paris agreed. I remember walking into this really chic store in Le Marais. They were selling furniture and design items. Very cool. And the guy working there said, "Pardon, qu'est-ce que vous portez comme parfum?" And I said, "Dior Homme." This happened a few times. It got noticed. Of course, I was drawn in by the captivating scent. It's mostly an iris fragrance, but it has some sweet notes. They list cacao, although in no way is this a gourmand fragrance. It's an iris scent. And iris is such an intriguing note. Sometimes it smells a little bit like lipstick and has this scent texture that comes across as kind of waxy. That's all true for Dior Homme. But I love that sweetness, and it's a very easy fragrance to put on and always puts me in a good mood. But that's not the only reason why I like to wear this fragrance. I used to like to just immerse myself in the entire Dior Homme world. The superstar fashion designer Hedi Slimane was the big designer for Dior's menswear, and it was under him that this fragrance came out. I loved the fashions. You remember them. Skinny suits, skinny tie. I'm trying to give you a little bit of the Dior Homme look now, although nothing that I'm wearing is actually from Dior. In fact, this jacket was given by my friend Susanna. She bought it, but it didn't fit her right. So she asked if I wanted to try it on, and I really love the fit, so thank you, Susanna. When I looked in the mirror, I wasn't sure if I was giving Dior Homme, but more bank teller. Let me know what you think. I just went for a swim break in downtown LA, which is pretty different from Les Halles in Paris. But while I was swimming, I started thinking of other examples where fashion and fragrance work together perfectly, like Alexander McQueen and his fragrance Kingdom, and how it perfectly suited the gothic romanticism of his clothes. Or currently, Rick Owens has a fragrance out that's very expensive, very edgy, ugly and beautiful at the same time. Do you have any examples where fashion and fragrance work together in perfect synergy? If so, let me know. I'd love to hear. So believe it or not, I actually met and hung out several times with Hedi Slimane. Back when I was in London working as a sculptor, he came and gave me a studio visit. We had a friend in common, so we were introduced. And the thing is, Hedi Slimane is very, very interested in contemporary art. In fact, he's a photographer himself. So he used to visit a lot of artists in their studio. I remember that when he came by my studio in Whitechapel in the East End of London, I was so excited and so nervous. So I did my best to just act normal and comfortably cool, although I don't know if I came across that way at all. But he was very nice, and I remember that he smelled amazing. It was kind of an incense smell, and it reminded me a little bit of papier d'Arménie, these incense papers that you can buy in any pharmacy in France. I'm wondering if he was wearing a fragrance that had a lot of benzoin resin, because that's what gives papier d'Arménie that distinctive smell. So shortly after my studio visit with Hedi Slimane, Dior came out with this exclusive line of fragrance, and I rushed to Selfridges department store to smell them, hoping that one of them would be the smell that Hedi was wearing in my studio. Honestly, I don't think any of them were, but the one that was the most like it, and subsequently my favorite from the lineup, was Bois d'Argent. I've been wearing Bois d'Argent ever since then, and this was maybe 2 decades ago. I've run through multiple big-sized bottles of this scent. It's one of those fragrances that I always need to have on hand because I wear it so often and love it. So this is the current iteration of Bois d'Argent. But I also have an older bottle in my collection that says Cologne on it, and that was the original version of it. This has gone through a little bit of a reformulation. And do they smell the same? More or less, yes, but there are differences. But I'm gonna wait for another video and do a deep dive into Bois d'Argent. Now, if you're wondering if when I lived in Paris, did I hang out a lot with Hedi Slimane? Not at all. Didn't see him again. But that's fine, because I would have been too terrified and too nervous to actually hang out with him. But I was invited to one of the Dior Homme fashion shows. This is the invitation. I was actually sent 2, and I kept this one unopened to keep as a souvenir. I remember when I RSVP'd to the show is when I learned the French word for a fashion show, which is défilé. So of course the défilé was incredible, the fashions were amazing, but I also saw Uma Thurman in the audience, and that made me excited. Speaking of reformulations, Dior Homme was reformulated, but drastically so. If you were to go to a Dior counter now and ask to smell Dior Homme, it wouldn't smell anything like the original version in 2005, designed by Olivier Polge. I don't know why they changed it so drastically, but apparently I'm not the only big fan of that scent, because in 2011, Dior gave what the people want, and they brought out the original version, the 2005 version, but interpreted by another perfumer, François Demachy. I never got to smell that version, and I think that that also disappeared over time. But in 2021, Dior came out with this. They're calling it Dior Homme Original. And basically, it's a remake of the 2011 François Demachy's version of the 2005 version. I know that sounds very complicated, but when I opened this bottle up after receiving it from Chris, it brought me right back to Léal, post-swim, popping into Sephora. All of those scent memories lit up in my brain, so scent-wise, it's a match. This is exactly how I remember this scent. This isn't the first time I've been the lucky beneficiary of Chris's generosity. Last year, he sent me a bottle of Dior Homme Perfume. I didn't even know this existed, but he thought I would like it, and clearly he knows my taste because I love it. So again, you get that sweet iris like the original Dior Homme, but what makes this one so different is the introduction of oud and other woods and incense and leather. It tells a very different story than the original Dior Homme. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put the Dior Homme Parfum on my right wrist. And I'm gonna put on Dior Homme Original, the 2021 version, on my left wrist. And I'm gonna let them do their thing as I go to IKEA to get some lunch. I don't know about you, but I love going to IKEA, not least for the food. A plate full of Swedish meatballs with potatoes and peas is exactly what I was in the mood for. I also got some shrimp salad and a little piece of marzipan for dessert. I somehow manifested this glass cloche because last week I was in an antique store in Pasadena and found a model of a classical bust, and I thought instantly that it should go into a cloche to protect it and to also give it a more museum-like look in my house. And sure enough, that's exactly what I found at IKEA. I'm very happy with my fragrance wardrobe. This piece of furniture that I found at a secondhand store in Highland Park in LA a few years ago. It's exactly what I wanted and it's the right size. But I'm always on the lookout for other pieces of furniture to do this, to house a perfume collection. Not so much for me, I'm good, but I know a lot of people who collect perfumes and I would like to be able to say, oh, I know where you can go to get something for your perfumes, because I do, IKEA. So this particular wardrobe comes in two sizes. One for if you have a lot of perfumes, and the other one if you have a lot of perfumes. Now what I would do personally is I'd probably go with the smaller one, and I'd get some marbleized paper from Paper Source or an art store and just put it up on the back wall of this cabinet. I'd use double stick tape so that I could remove it if I didn't want it anymore. And I wouldn't worry too much about being immaculate or perfect with it because you're going to be putting shelves back in and all of these bottles of perfume. But I just think that as a background would look very cool. I also saw these interesting plates with this great glaze pattern. At first I wondered if it was enamel, but it is actually ceramic. So having worn these fragrances for several hours, what happens in the dry down? They're telling very different stories. The Perfume is much darker. It's a rugged scent. And in addition to incense, I feel like I'm also getting a little bit of blown out match. This is beautiful. Perfect for a winter's evening, in my opinion. Whereas the original Dior Homme stays very fluffy, slightly sweet, incredibly happy and very comforting, but still chic at the same time. To be honest, this is more what I'm in the mood for today. So I don't think it's a coincidence that both Dior Homme and Bois d'Argent, two of my favorite fragrances, came out during the tenure of Hedi Slimane at Dior. And then more recently, he was the designer at Celine. He has since left Celine. But while he was there, the brand came out with a collection of perfumes which are excellent. I own 3. I don't think Hedi Slimane has anything to do with the creation of these perfumes, but I do think he has a say, because it's not a coincidence that wherever he goes, there's suddenly amazing fragrances. The one from Celine that I think is in the lineage of Dior Homme, and even Bois d'Argent, would be Black Tie, because you have the sweetness and you have iris. But whereas these fragrances are more about the iris, this is more about the sweetness. In fact, I would classify Black Tie as a vanilla scent more than anything else. Oh, that's beautiful. But the iris does play an important role in this fragrance, and it gives it a very luxurious, chic feel. Whenever I wear Black Tie, I always get compliments. It's kind of like the new Dior Homme for me. And having nothing to do with Hedi Slimane, we have the omniscient Mr. Thompson from Penhaligon's. This came out in 2023. I'm borrowing this bottle from work right now. And the first time I sprayed on this scent, It reminded me so much of the original Dior Homme. Sweet iris, beautiful. But what sets this apart from the others is this creaminess. Now, the brand lists sesame as a note, but for me, it resembles more milky tea, and I can't get enough of that. Incredibly comforting, very lovely to smell. So I have a selection of incredible fragrances in front of me, but the one I'm probably going to wear this evening is Dior Homme Original. I'm meeting up with some friends for dinner, but first I'm going to spray myself liberally with this, then go out and walk my dogs before heading out to the restaurant.